Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome back to our Tour de France 2020 discussion. We're on to stage number 20. This is the individual time trial. It's also the penultimate stage of the race. For the most part, the race is decided today. Green jersey to be decided tomorrow, but the race itself, this is it, folks. The teams have done their jobs. Now it's up to the individuals to make it happen today on this somewhat lengthy. It's certainly not the longest time trial we've seen at the Tour. 36.5 kilometers. There was a couple checkpoints early on, and then one big, massive climb to the finish. You can see David Formulo going over the top, 30th, 4 minutes behind. Been riding here with UAE. Today we're playing Pro Cycling Manager 2020 for this one. And yes, I finally have PCM back as my CPU arrived yesterday in the mail. And so we are back up and running on this one. And so we do play stage 20 of the Tour, so you can see the profile of it here. Massive climb at the end. It's 5.9 kilometers in length. It goes as much as 20% on the gradient just before the top. It levels off just a little bit. And we ride with Tadej Pogacar's team on this one, who sits second place entering the stage in real life. Now, I don't care necessarily how I do on this stage. What we care about for this, of course, is how the stage itself actually went in real life. Fabio Aru, -2 for him. Let's set that. Let's go for an 81 through here. He's a better climber. All right, so De La Cruz, you can see he was passed by Cavendish, but he's flying past him here now, making up time on the climb as somebody who's a bit of a stronger climber. Anyway, early on, most of the sprinters were among the first riders out on course this morning, and there was the possibility that they might be outside of the time cut and not be able to ride to the Champs-Élysées tomorrow. They're going to have to really push it. Early predictions suggested that it would be about 50 minutes for the winner's time. Their initial times would have been outside of that window. De La Cruz pushes right to the end, right down to that last percentage point, but only 33rd for him. Aru struggling with that -2 race day condition here for sure. Does not have as much energy as he should. From those times, it was looking like those sprinters desperate to see the winning time at or above about 53 minutes to avoid being cut on the stage. The early leader and one of those first riders to go, Remy Cavagna, his time, 57:54 out on course. And he was the only rider under an hour for quite some time. And even as we got to that point where we were down to those final riders, of course, if you don't know how they do this, if you haven't watched the Tour much, what you end up with is a scenario where, ouch, -5 for Pogacar today. What? Oh, poor guy. Oh, that's ridiculous. Well, he's not winning this Tour, but he's in contention for another. Anyway, they go reverse order. So the last rider in the field in terms of GC was the first to set off today, and they go reverse order to the final rider to set off on the day being Primož Roglic. Cavagna, one of those lower riders, sets that early tempo again. Just under 58 minutes was his time. And as we get to the point where the leaders are all about to set off, there was still only 4 riders that had gone under an hour. So within that 2-minute window of where Cavagna was, and none of them were really very close to that time. They were all around that 59-minute mark. Carapaz, the first one with a real interest on the day. And there goes Roglic past us. Yeah, that's not good. This -5 is nasty. Aru was 92nd out. Carapaz, that first one we cared about because of the KOM. Now his position, right? He's actually still pretty high in the overall standings, so he only set off a short time before the leaders, so he'd be kind of in and amongst them. And then unfortunately, because of the attention on the GC and on the potential stage victory, we saw Carapaz when he first set off. We didn't see him again until he crossed the finish line. So we have no idea what happened. But I can tell you this much. He set off very slowly. And
the riders are going through a very tough portion with percentages above 10%.
Extremely slow. And that pace was intentional. He was conserving energy. The way the KOM works for this one is it's all about the climb, that climb that we're on right now with Pogacar. The point here being that last time check right at the base, they start a clock right there, and then they take that clock to the finish line. And that is your net on whatever you get, that net time. So not the whole stage, but just the climb would determine. It's a Cat 1 climb, so 10 points on offer. Carapaz enters with a 2-point lead over the guy we're riding with now, Pogacar. So very much race on. But of course, Pogacar and the other contender, Roglic, who's up the road here, unfortunately, they were both in that scenario where they need to do overall time. They're racing for the yellow jersey, not for the KOM. So they needed to not only be quick on the climb, but they needed to be quick over the whole stage. We see Pogacar with that -5, with that -10 stamina resistance, just killing him here. We're really having to back off towards the top of the climb, and we're going to be nowhere near the time that we need to be on this one. 46th overall, 3 minutes 45 seconds behind. Really bad time for Pogacar, but that's that -5 race day condition set on random. Remco Evenepoel goes quickest. Roglic was second quickest. Not the leader here, as it's Egan Bernal. Bernal crossing the line there, and it looks like he's not even the last one. Oh, he is. So Evenepoel wins the stage on this, but that's not the point. We're talking about the actual stage. So Carapaz we never saw on the climb. We have no idea how he did, other than that at the finish line he was absolutely flying. Time checks. Van Aert was 6 seconds ahead of Cavagna at the third check, partway up that final climb. That's the first time we saw anyone going anywhere near Cavagna's time. And Van Aert's in the top. He was in the teens in the standings. Over the top, he's going to go into the virtual lead of the race with a 57.26. So leading the stage, bumping Cavagna finally off where he sat in that hot seat for hours. On to the leaders. Pogacar. Absolutely flying at the first check. Lopez, the loser among the leaders, he was well down. Roglic was doing actually really well. He was only 13 seconds down compared to Pogacar at that first check, and with 57 seconds, he still had 44 to play with. Plenty of time. Uran up on Yates. That was the notable first checkpoint of those guys. As we approach the second checkpoint, as we approach the base of the climb, going over, well, really this section here, right, as they rode through here. Roglic was quick enough that it became quite clear, especially with Lopez doing poorly, that his only threat is Pogacar. Nobody else was going to threaten that jersey, unless, of course, he crashes out. I didn't see a single crash today, though. I might have missed one. I didn't watch every single second, but I didn't see a single crash. It was not the most technical of courses. There was a few roundabouts through the first sector. That was about it. Even though Roglic was doing well, Pogacar was still flying. And through that second sector, so through the flat section, Roglic had lost 30 seconds. Of course, at this point, the big question is, has Pogacar gone too hard, too fast? Can he maintain that pace on the climb? Because he's looked very tired recently. Richie Porte had moved into a virtual podium position up to third. He does the bike change at the base. Soon after, we see Pogacar. He does the bike change. And it was a really quick bike change. Roglic, last one coming up, he also does the bike change. And it wasn't a slow one, but it was definitely a few seconds slower than Pogacar. So he lost a few seconds on the bike change. But with all of the top contenders doing a bike change, there was no give and take. There was no 20-second advantage. There were plenty of riders today that opted to stay on their time trial bikes up that final climb. Plenty of teammates testing both variations to see, is it quicker, is it slower? And ultimately it looked kind of like a wash, right? You lose about 20, 25 seconds doing the bike change. And what do you gain on the climb? Well, the times seem to suggest that it was what you gain from using the road bike, the climbing road bike, versus the time trial bike. The give and take seemed to be about even. Through that second checkpoint, right at the base of the climb, Tom Dumoulin ended up the fastest overall. That makes sense. He was the top time trialist here, outside of a couple guys who aren't the strongest climbers, and it was going to be quite clear that they weren't going to contend on the stage, and so they didn't push. Cavagna was the only one who really pushed all the way through, and Van Aert pushed all the way through. And he's not known as a time trialist, so Tom Dumoulin going through quickest makes perfect sense. But guess who was only 1 second behind at the second checkpoint? Tadej Pogacar. 1 second down overall. Remy Cavagna, the one who had been the leader most of the day, was 18 seconds down at that point, but he's going to lose a bit of time on the climb. Not known as a top climber. He definitely put in a strong time trial through the first part and then held on over the climb. Primož Roglic, fourth quickest at the second checkpoint. He was not slow in any way, shape, or form, but his lead was being cut into because he was 37 seconds down on Dumoulin, which meant he was 36 seconds down on Pogacar at the base of the climb, which was just after their bike changes, and that meant he had lost 36 seconds of his 57-second lead at that point in time. He was down to just 21-second lead. But again, wasn't riding as hard. So, is the gap going to go back out? Is it going to hold? Is it going to go the other way? Either way, it was looking pretty exciting as they hit the base of the climb. At this point, the guys on the back end of the top 10 or just inside the teens all start to come across the finish line, and Tom Dumoulin goes quickest with a 57.16. Soon after, Richie Porte crosses the line with a 57.16. Less than half a second off of the time of Tom Dumoulin. That's incredible that they came in the same second, tying themselves on that virtual lead. But Dumoulin just a fraction of a second quicker than Richie Porte. Fantastic ride by Porte, though. Absolutely forced his way onto the podium. And he wasn't even going to need to, because Miguel Angel Lopez was the slowest by far of the contenders and is going to lose a ton of time. Porte didn't need that ride, but it was a superb ride. Now, on the base of the climb, after the bike changes were done, the gap soon thereafter, it was down to just 10 seconds, meaning Pogacar was 47 seconds quicker at this point in time. Now, again, the climb just a shade under 6K. So halfway through, at the 3K to go mark, Pogacar wasn't letting up. He kept riding, and he kept riding hard. And he was up to a 17-second virtual race lead. Yes, lead, as in he had moved ahead. The 10 seconds plus another 17. Pogacar was pulling away. With 2K to go, it was up to 45 seconds on that virtual lead, And it became quite clear that unless he absolutely blew up in that final kilometer or two and that 20% gradient, that he stood to win this tour. What a ride by Tadej Pogacar. Now, again, among the contenders, it became quite clear as we were getting glimpses of some of the riders either at the line or some way up the climb. Yates was slow. Moss was doing pretty good. Lopez had lost at least 4 minutes. We knew this because not only had he been passed by Pogacar, who had been flying and was the one who started 2 minutes behind him, but it became quite evident when Roglic caught and passed Lopez. 4 minutes was the gap between them at the start house. And at the finish line, Lopez will be the last one to cross the line, even though he was third from the end at the start. Pogacar, he's not going to let up. He didn't run out of energy, and he kept pushing, and he kept attacking all the way to the finish line. Outside of Carapaz, of every single rider I saw over the top of that climb, and it levels off just at the peak, Pogacar was one of only 2 riders who was still full-on sprinting at the finish. Carapaz being one of them, and we didn't see him on the climb at all outside of that. But Pogacar flies across the finish line, blitzing the best time with a 55.55. Now, for a moment, we'll talk about the green jersey. We said they were hoping that the time would be 53 or higher. So they had about 3 minutes to spare. So it looks like none of the riders, or only 1 or 2 riders, if any, were going to face that time cut. So most everybody should be secure going into the final stage, and we get our green jersey competition played out. Of all those green jersey riders, contenders, it was Sam Bennett who was the slowest by far. So he was the one who faced that threat as the greatest challenge. He was the most threatened by the potential times. So Pogacar, 55.55, is going to win the stage and put himself in position to take the yellow jersey. He was a minute 21 faster than Dumoulin and Porte, who were in the 1-2 at the time on same time. Roglic was at 55.32 with 1 kilometer to go. So he was just 23 seconds away at that point and still had that 20% gradient to get up and over before things level off in the final couple hundred meters. He will end up losing 2 minutes to Pogacar with a 57.51, which is actually a pretty dang good time. He took 5th on the stage. But Pogacar beats him by a minute and 56, which translates to a 59-second gap. He completely flipped. He went from a 57-second deficit to a 59-second advantage through that stage. Most people thought that was totally secure. And I said that obviously Roglic the favorite with that kind of gap, but it was not over yet, and that there could be some definite time gaps. And there were. Nobody expected him to completely flip the deficit to the same lead. The other way around. That was absolutely phenomenal. This is a stage, that is a ride that will be talked about for many, many years. This tour has been about Ineos and Jumbo-Visma. This tour has been about how Ineos, for the first time, didn't come with its strongest team. And how, over time, showed that they're just not on it right now. They're just not on it for this tour. For Jumbo-Visma, they came in on paper looking like the strongest team. And I had mentioned in my predictions that I thought Roglic would take second, which is exactly where he is. And I did mention that I felt Pogacar very well could be on the podium. Or Carapaz or Dumoulin, but probably a Pogacar. I thought Bernal could hang on to it because I thought Ineos would be better off. It was not their tour. Carapaz did well, isn't going to win the KOM. He loses out on that one, and we'll come back to that in a second. Because of Pogacar and that phenomenal ride today. But Jumbo-Visma was absolutely the team of the tour, and they were flawed. They made some mistakes. They could have had more time. They could have made a bigger dent on the chasing pack. Roglic never really put his foot down and tried to blow everyone away. Roglic was always just playing it smart, playing it tactical. And that's why some of those gaps stayed a lot closer than they could have or should have in this tour. At least that's my opinion on it. And while Jumbo-Visma, the team, while Van Aert, the rider, won the tour through those 19 stages, today there was no team support. Van Aert again showed just how good he is by taking 4th place today. After all the work he's done, after hundreds of kilometers as the guy at the front, on climbs, steep climbs, blowing away rider after rider after rider in the field, in the pack, and leaving them in the dust, including GC riders, including the top climbers in the world in the top 10, again and again. And then he still comes out today and grabs 4th place. Van Aert, definitely the rider of the tour. Jumbo-Visma, like I said, made some mistakes, but they were clearly the team of the tour. And for Pogacar, his UAE team, especially without Aru, were nowhere near strong enough. He had David de la Cruz, and that's about it. Otherwise, he had no support. And yet, he just rode smart, and he just stayed with. And the only time he lost all tour was that windy stage, where he lost a little bit of time. But he gained some time back. And he fought back, and he gained seconds here, and he gained seconds there. And at the end of this thing, he was less than a minute behind. But there was no team ride today. It was about the individual. And individually, while Jumbo-Visma might have been the best team, propelling Roglic, who is definitely one of the 3 best climbers of this tour, into that yellow jersey, today was about the individual, and Pogacar, by far, was that best individual. What a ride. Holy cow. All right, here's the GC as of right now. Pogacar in yellow as they ride into Paris tomorrow. Roglic 59 seconds behind in second. Port steps onto the podium comfortably at 3:30 behind. Landa 2 seconds shy of 6 minutes behind. Mas 6:07. Lopez from the podium all the way down to 6:47, 40 seconds behind Mas. Mas was just in, 9th place the other day? Tom Dumoulin, 7:48 with that strong time trial. And that, of course, is his area of strength. But that's also, looking at the profile, why I knew no chance of him winning the tour this year. And 8 minutes behind. I mean, come on. That's not a guy who belongs on the podium, who rode for himself, even though he's Jumbo-Visma. He did very little for the team. He did one stage where he only lost a few seconds at the end of it. Half a minute, maybe. Uran, 8:02. Yates, 9:25. Damiano Caruso into the top 10 at 14:03. What a ride by him. That was fantastic to get onto the top 10 for Caruso. Now, in the KOM, again, the time taken at the base of the climb to the top of the climb, not through the first 2 sectors, just the climb itself, I didn't see the times, but here are your top 6. Pogacar, Port, Van Aert, Moss, Bilbao, Martinez. Carapaz doesn't even get a minor placing. Dumoulin doesn't get a minor placing. Really strong showing. Clearly strongest climbers at the top on that one. And Van Aert, 3rd. Van Aert could be a GC guy. Van Aert could win a Grand Tour. Watching him in this tour, watching him today, 3rd up that climb, 4th on the stage overall, after all the work that he has done, after how much he's buried himself. And unlike Dumoulin, who always still had energy left and cruised to victory, cruised to the finish of stages after, working for a couple hundred meters or a couple of kilometers, Van Aert would bury himself for 60K at the front and then have nothing left in the tank and then just go to a standstill. He still finished in the top 20. And still managed to go up that climb 3rd today. Watch out for him. He is going to be potentially the best rider in the world. He could do anything right now. I mean, the way we looked at Alaphilippe over the last couple of years, the way that Van der Poel, like Van Aert, has come onto the scene, but a little ahead of Van Aert, the way Sagan has gained recognition and reputation around the world, Van Aert, if he doesn't have it yet, he'll have it before the end of next year. He should have it by now. But there are definitely people who have lived under a rock since March of 2020. So there are people that don't know yet. But if they don't know the name now, they will soon. So with 10 points scored in the KOM, Pogacar goes from 72 up to 82 points. So he has the yellow jersey. He has the polka dot jersey. And he's got the white Young Riders jersey. The only jersey he doesn't have is the green jersey. Wow, what a phenomenal tour from Pogacar. Carapaz 2nd in the KOM, Roglic 3rd. There's a single point on offer tomorrow. Carapaz has 74. He's 8 points behind. There will be no change in the standings. That point is irrelevant tomorrow. There is an intermediate sprint. And, of course, the Champs-Élysées. Green jersey, well, it would be a 2-point competition if not for that penalty, if not for that selfie stick. But at 55, I don't know. There's 70 points available, 20 at the intermediate, 50 at the finish. And Bennett certainly looks the most tired of all the sprinters, even more so than Ewan. And Ewan looks pretty tired too. So the favorites look like they might not do so well tomorrow, actually. Giving the hybrids a bit of a chance. And, of course, the Champs-Élysées, that's a pretty bumpy road. Meaning there's going to be a lot of fatigue that the road puts into the riders. And this has been a very hard tour. So some of those top sprinters might not be in the best position at the finish tomorrow. It's not over yet. But at that kind of deficit, especially on the intermediate sprint, it's unlikely that Sagan will finish more than a couple points ahead of Bennett at that point. Maybe at the finish, he can finish higher. But it's going to be hard for Sagan to win both the intermediate and the final sprint. And B, it's going to be hard for Bennett to not score any points. And essentially we need all 3 of those things to happen. The double by Sagan and the nothing by Bennett, or next to nothing. It just seems unlikely. Trentin also just a handful of points behind Sagan, so it's still on, but it's not looking so good on that. But there it is. Your yellow jersey goes on the shoulders of Tadej Pogacar with one heck of a ride. That's going to go down similar to the way we talk about Chris Froome at the Giro, stage 19. That type of ride. This was an absolute monster ride. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit that like button and do join the comments below and look out for my PCM and other series coming back to normal schedules now. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there, and bye for now.